Welcome back to Burnout Break Room, the podcast that's like a break room, but helpful, where we look at burnout through a realistic lens, talk about ways to take a break from the grind, and spill the tea.
I'm Caitlin Truhella, creativity coach and speaker.
And I'm Lyndie Larimore, licensed therapist, certified career coach, and consultant. We're your hosts, and thank you for joining us here in the Burnout Break Room. This episode is brought to you by Loop Earplugs. As the winner of the Red Dot Award for product design, Loop is globally recognized for its innovation in earwear, promising long lasting ear protection. Whether for focus, fun, or better sleep, you'll find durable quality and premium comfort in every pair. Use our link to get 15% off your next purchase today and live life at your volume. Lean into everything you love that's loud with a bold noise reducing earwear. Thank you, Loop. Hi, Caitlin. How
Hey,
are you?
Lindy.
How are you today?
I am managing today. At the time of this recording, unfortunately, the very lovely and lauded Dr. Jane Goodall has passed, and I'm feeling it.
Mm,
hmm
yeah, she was important to you, right?
Very much so. Yeah, ever since I was young, she was like one of my heroes. And honestly, she was one of the first women in science that I learned about, and therefore kind of set the tone for, the possibility of, women in STEM and also just in, I guess you would say, a higher academic setting. So, yeah, she was a big inspiration to me for sure.
Mm, yeah, a huge loss to the world and to the scientific community, and absolutely groundbreaking the spaces that she was able to be in and the work that she was able to do. It's hard to lose. I think, especially at times like this, it's hard to lose women who have been the trailblazers because I think I'm feeling the absence of strong female voices right now in the world. I feel like they're being intentionally drowned out. I'm not saying they're not there. They're definitely there, but I think there's so much like other noise happening that it's hard to see another big presence being lost. I remember being particularly affected when Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away
Mm,
and the timing of her loss and how it just felt like it just felt like there was symbolism there. And I don't think that was wrong at the time. Like, I think just knowing that she was gone and the timing just felt particularly poignant. And there's something about this loss that feels that way too.
yeah, most definitely. It feels like a collective loss for sure. And I couldn't agree with you more. Like those, because the other voices that have, been an ongoing part in important advocacy are still there, but it definitely feels like there's so much work being done to drown them out or to silence them. I've read some of Greta Thunberg's works as well, and in very much the same way, it's like that reminder that everyone can make a difference. And I mean, even reading her speeches from, such a young age, it's so inspiring. So I feel like the other part of this, Lindy, is like, yes, we can recognize important people in our lives and inspirational figures, but it's these things are more than just one person, and remembering that it is the collective that comes together to make a difference. But those collectives can start with one person.
Yes, there's often the person who says the thing that no one else is saying, who inspires others or does the thing that no one else is doing, right? And it can sometimes be the same thing or two different things, right? So then they inspire everyone else to come along and to join. So if you're one of those people, we see you, we appreciate you. We know that that's exhausting work because oftentimes they're also the recipients of the backlash, and that can be exhausting. So, yeah, if you have something to say that feels important, say it. and find some good community.
Definitely. I feel like the other side of that too is grief can take many forms.
Hmm.
And sometimes even just recognizing it can be like a sense of relief. But yeah, it's difficult to be that person to make waves and push back against these big systems and the mentalities of like this is the way that we've always done it kind of thing. And sometimes we do that just by recognizing that the job we're in or the working situation we're in is not working for us anymore.
Hmm. It's so good that you use the term grief there because I do think there is a grief when you recognize that you are in a relationship that's no longer serving you. And that's exactly what a job is, right? You're in relationship with your job.
Hmm.
Um, and there is this moment in burnout work, as a burnout coach and as a therapist who works with folks in burnout. I don't know that I've said out loud that most of the time, the work that we're doing is not this is how you leave the toxic job situation. It's this is how you survive the toxic job situation until you can get out in a way that does more good than harm, right?
Mm.
It actually reminds me a little bit of the work that I've done with survivors of domestic violence, which might sound extreme and it's not exactly the same thing. Let me be clear. But there is an element of the moment between this relationship is unhealthy for me and being free of that relationship can sometimes take years for some folks.
Hmm.
And it's often this kind of back and forth, like, well, maybe I'm just overreacting. Maybe if I just am a little more quiet or maybe if I wasn't so difficult to work with, et cetera, then maybe this would work out better. And there's often that kind of I see this both with folks in toxic relationships and with folks in toxic work environments. Both situations require a lot of gaslighting to keep afloat.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. And boy, is gaslighting a powerful thing.
Yes. Oh my gosh. You are so incredibly on the nose with this, Lindy. And yes, I do agree with you that obviously there are nuances between these two situations, but your work life is absolutely a relationship. Like we have relationship with our jobs in general, and then also your working relationships with your colleagues too, because as I'm sure everybody has experienced, there's always one person in a workplace that in one form or another makes everyone's day more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I feel like one of the most empowering things that we can do for ourselves in both personal relationships and our work settings is recognize in any and all of the ways that being complacent or just accepting those situations as they are serve either the system or the other person.
And Caitlin, here's here's to your point. Here is a moment that is really difficult when it comes to recognizing I'm in a toxic work situation. I
Mm,
can't afford to leave yet, whether it's because I can't, the job market is difficult right now. So I can't just quit my job, right? Until I have something else lined up.
right.
And for many people, they need to have something lined up that pays something similar, right? Or
Hmm.
they might want to take a pay cut, but they need to have something else to supplement, right? So that takes time, especially in a tough job market. But sometimes the conversation I'm having, and this is a difficult one, is yes, you work in a toxic environment, whether it's because you are being treated differently and unfairly because of some kind of identity that you carry, or leadership is just failing right now. They're just not stepping up to the plate, and therefore things are a hot dumpster fire. Whatever it is, sometimes the really awful truth that comes out of that is I'm going to have to put up with this.
Mm-hmm.
and not do a damn thing about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a difficult moment. And that usually comes after, I've tried to talk to my supervisor, I've tried to talk to coworkers, I've tried to address it in all of the professional and appropriate ways, and sometimes even like unprofessional and inappropriate ways. Maybe I've even
Mm-hmm.
gone to HR, right? Like it's after all of those options have been visited and you recognize that really awful moment when it's like, oh, this is what's happening. Got
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yep.
So it's choosing to give up and fail, but knowing you can't leave yet can be a
Right.
really tough moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And especially for one of the things that we've talked about previously is the kind of burnout that happens when you're not aligned with your principles. And I mean, I feel like so many people have experienced it in that way, especially like I think it was a couple of years ago now, the trend, on social media talking about like act your wage and like revolutionary idea of quiet quitting. And you have people in leadership that are there's so much conversation that happened after the fact, like why is this happening and how do we counteract it? Because we don't want people to be doing the bare minimum, but it's not from a worker standpoint, it's not wanting to do the bare minimum. It is a reaction to an impossible situation. People have exhausted their options. They've gone to HR. They've, tried dealing with poor situations that make these toxic work situations unbearable. They've done everything that they can. And in so many situations they're not heard or paid attention to, and ultimately there is no solution. And so that realization that you're talking about, that this is something that I'm just going to have to put up with, it is a form of grief, because you then every day you come into work, you know what you're going to be met with. You know that it's going to require more of your energy, both, mental, emotional, spiritual, physical energy, everything, and a bag of potato chips.
Well, and Caitlin, there is this other category that happens too, which is like they have spoken up, they have said something, and now they're being targeted
Mm,
or intentionally left off of things. Or maybe they were flying under the radar before, and now everyone's paying attention to their work. And maybe even it's feeling like, oh, you're really waiting for me to mess up here because I've become a fly in the ointment. I've
yep.
become a disruptor. I've been identified as someone as a threat to the system in some ways. And that it's not always that situation, but it can be. And so part of the work that I do as a therapist who specializes in burnout or as a burnout coach is sitting with folks as they are in that situation.
Mm,
And I think part of the grief that I see is oftentimes folks who are in that situation are some of the hardest workers there. They are the people who have been giving 125% since day one. And it is not until they've hit this wall where they're like, if I continue to give 125%, I'm going to be punished 185%.
yep.
And I will be too visible and it will be used against me. And I know this might even sound paranoid but I have a feeling this will resonate with some folks. Like, I need to start being invisible and mediocre in order to survive this work until I can get out in a safe way, which is again very similar to domestic violence work, right? We talk about gray rocking in when being in relationship with toxic folks.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of being the grayest rock in the room, the most boring person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, Caitlin, some of the best advice that I got when I was in a situation similar to that was talk as if you're reading out of a textbook on good business practice,
Mm-hmm.
or talk as if you're reading out of a textbook on leadership. So it's not like you're trying to be creative. It's not trying like you're trying to reinvent the wheel. You are just trying to almost be as like almost robotic and uninteresting as possible in
Mm,
order to get through to the other side. And for those who have given a lot to their jobs, who have tried to create a better world for the people there, that is absolutely a huge loss.
mm, absolutely. And I just want to call out one of the things that you mentioned before as well is coming to that realization that you are being targeted at work and having that reaction or assumption, am I being paranoid and the self-questioning that follows, that is a direct result of the same kind of gaslighting that we were talking about earlier. But in these situations, you really have to listen to your gut instinct, listen to your intuition. If something doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right for a reason. And of course, I understand that this in a lot of situations can be a lot to ask to just simply listen to your intuition because when we find ourselves in these spaces, either in like bad relationships or in a toxic work environment, they are so often the product of, it's somewhat morbid, but the phrase like death by a thousand cuts.
Mm-hmm.
Because of course, if these situations were as toxic as they are, several years or what have you down the road on day one, of course, it'd be raising, red flags all over the place. But this is how we learn to identify, the environments and the situations and the people that don't work for us or that actively don't have our best interest at heart. That's one of the ways in which we learn. And so, yeah, I know it's not an easy thing to do to just trust your intuition, but this is a whole process of relearning to listen to that gut instinct for yourself.
Absolutely. One of the most effective ways to beat someone down is to get them to stop trusting their gut. And so, something that can be very effective when recognizing, oh, I no longer can trust, feel like I can trust my gut, is to, and I think this is extremely important in any toxic situation, whether it's a relationship or work, is to find your safe people. And there's always one or two. There's always one or two. And know what's safe to share, because then you can go to those people and say, hey, like I feel like I'm in this weird situation. Is it okay if I pass this by you and get your perspective on whether or not this is me overreacting, this is me, not trusting my gut, or this is me responding to a bad situation. And so, find those people that can be your sounding boards, and even share with them that like it's extremely important that you not share this with anyone. It's extremely important that this conversation
Mm,
remain confidential,
hmm.
and see to which level they are comfortable with that, and if they're not comfortable with that, honor that, respect it, but find your safe people so that you can use them as a sounding board if you feel that you are experiencing some form of gaslighting.
Absolutely. And Lindy, this is amazing advice. And also going back to gray rocking as you were talking about before, like become the most uninteresting person in the room in order to fly under the radar. But I feel like this ties in beautifully to what you're talking about too, because when when you start to become invisible and blend into the background, you can also take in a lot more information about how other people act. And so, in the same way, one of the easiest ways to determine people who at least have the potential to be trustworthy is observing not just who they talk to, but what they talk about. So, for example, people that talk a lot about others, even if it's not necessarily in a gossipy way, I mean, that's your red flag right there. So, there's if they're comfortable sharing information about other people or other situations, even if it's just for their own benefit of being the person in the room that has a story, then yeah, that's probably not a safe person to share that with. And I know we've mentioned it a little bit in other episodes as well, even when it comes to finding friends in the workplace. Sometimes, as a result of trauma bonding from these situations. So, obviously, in an ideal world, we can, make workplace friendships without having to trauma bond.
Hmm.
But at least those that can be a potential, good situation to come out of it.
Hmm. So I want to almost do a little recapping because I do think we're not every episode is about like giving advice, but we've talked about like if you recognize that you're feeling under a microscope, it's okay to be the gray rock. It's okay to be uninteresting, and you might need to fly under the radar, and that's okay. Next piece of advice is find your safe person.
Hmm.
There's another thing that you in that, Caitlin, that you highlighted that I want to bring forward that was actually really, really important for me when I felt overwhelmed in a situation and over my head. So this is specific to me, but maybe somebody needs to hear this. Before I found out I had ADHD, one of the symptoms that I experienced, and this is a symptom of ADHD that was quite disruptive to my early days in leadership, was I would have this thing that I felt like I needed to say that was like burning inside of me. And it was actually really uncomfortable for me to just sit with it.
Mm,
And so, and especially if I was in a situation that made me feel anxious. So, and sometimes it was because it needed to be said, or like I had a solution to a problem, or I was recognizing a problem that no one else was recognizing. But part of that with ADHD is it's actually like really physically uncomfortable to kind of hold it in.
mm,
So there was a moment where like that tendency or urge helped me because then I had a little more nerve, right? To like just kind of say something in a Zoom meeting when we suddenly everyone was on Zoom, right? And I think a lot of people that found that really overwhelming. Like, I don't know how to act on Zoom suddenly. And I just was like, I guess I'll talk now, right?
mm,
But there was also a lot of times when I probably didn't need to say anything because there's this thing where you say something and suddenly that means you're volunteering for something you didn't mean to volunteer. So when you have the good idea, suddenly you're in charge of the good idea, right?
yes. Oh my gosh.
So in the best of times, like ask yourself before you unmute or raise your hand or jump into a conversation, do I want to be in charge of this project?
Mm-hmm.
But then, as time went on, and I found myself more and more in situations where speaking up might have put me in a precarious situation, perhaps. It really helped to hear someone say to me, Lyndie, it's okay if you don't say it out loud. Like, it's okay to just not say anything,
Right.
which for some people might be like, yeah, no kidding, right? I needed to hear that. I needed to hear, like, Lyndie, it's okay for you to just kind of keep your mouth shut, which sounds so awful. And like, I don't know, like, I would never say that to a woman, but I needed to hear that, if that makes sense. Like, so I think the advice that I would give is before you say anything, when you are in situations like this, pause and ask yourself, how can this be used against me?
Mm. Yeah. Is this going to put a target on my back?
Yes, exactly. And if so, it's probably not worth saying, even if it's the best idea in the room. Sometimes because it's the best idea in the room, it puts a target on your back.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm thinking immediately, Lindy, of like the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, which let me just do a small asterisk on that. I personally do not agree with most of the principles outlined
Mhm.
in that book. However, I do think it is good information to know, especially in these situations, because the principles are followed by a lot of the systems and the people in power in these spaces. So we certainly don't have to live our lives by these principles, but it is good to know. And the one that you're reminding me of the most is the number one rule in these 48 laws of power is don't outshine the master,
Mm-hmm.
which is so fucking bonkers
Mm-hmm.
in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Like we you really mean to tell me that any organization is only going to thrive if we all tiptoe around the CEO's ego?
Mm-hmm.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So part of the advice is recognize when your CEO or supervisor or manager or director requires you to walk on eggshells. Like that's really important information to know. If they are uncomfortable with being outshined,
Hmm.
yes, probably don't be there. But to our point, that's often not an immediate solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I forget, the other thing that I want to mention as well, because this was a huge part of my experience in not only realizing that I was burnt out, but in a toxic situation that I wasn't able to leave immediately in the workplace, is that horrible sinking feeling of, oh shit, 95% of my network is in this workplace. And so
Mm-hmm.
therefore, I didn't recognize that I wasn't doing the work to expand and nurture and, develop my network outside of this environment.
And Caitlin, you're reminding me actually of something that was a red flag and an indication that I was in a toxic workplace, and I didn't recognize it as such right away. When a workplace views networking as a threat. So
Yes. Yes.
specifically, like I always loved one of the things I loved about doing startup work was it often requires a lot of networking. It requires a lot of getting to know other people in the area, other people that are doing similar work. I loved doing that. I loved setting up relationships in the community and getting our name out there and being able to go to schools and first responders and other people providing similar services and setting up these relationships. One of my most favorite things about startup work. When I went to an organization that was fully established and they didn't understand why I wanted to continue that work, it was a sign that I was in a toxic work environment. I
Hmm.
just didn't see it as such.
Hmm.
And because there was this idea that was like, well, why would we go outside of our own environment? We have all the answers. We're doing it right. We don't need to like be bothered with creating relationships outside of ourselves. So I would say, yes, networking is so important for the reasons we're talking about. But also, if that is viewed as threatening, that's a red flag that you might be in a toxic environment.
Huge. Absolutely. And I just want to expand on that too. It's especially in terms of identifying red flags. One red flag that absolutely flew under the radar for me at the start of like being in this particular environment was not just an environment seeing networking as a threat,
Mhm.
but as I saw, people transition out of the company and go on to do other things, specifically like how those interactions were manifested on LinkedIn, just as one example, is the treatment of those people. As soon as you leave the company, it's like you're dead to all
Mhm.
the people in that network. There's no more engagement whatsoever. It's they're outsiders now. And so
Mhm.
it's like that us and them mentality.
Oh,
And in this way, I think to, I guess, like put a specific perspective on it, or like one of the ways this red flag is manifested is the mentality in a workplace that, I mean, if I'm to use the dreaded F word and say that we're like a family,
yeah.
but But again, that us and them mentality of our unity is solely based on keeping everybody in the house necessarily.
So here is a sign that you are in a toxic work environment. Weaponized loyalty.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a societal thing. I think we're in a society that values loyalty, and maybe I'm getting it wrong, but loyalty can actually be it's often viewed as a positive, and it can be, but only if it's allowed to be questioned. And loyalty is a tricky subject because
Mm-hmm.
companies rely on it not only in their branding and their PR, but also in order to keep folks working there. But loyalty should be something that is earned, not expected.
Not transactional.
It's not
Mm-hmm.
transactional. So if loyalty is treated like something that the company or your leaders should just get by virtue of just being the company and the leaders, then that's kind of a red flag for toxicity, right? If loyalty is more of something that they recognize they have to earn from you every day, and that they recognize that you can take other opportunities whenever you want or need to, that you can and should grow, which means that you hopefully are not in that position forever, right? So loyalty is something that you have for that company because you feel invested in, because because they're investing in your future, even if that means that you leave. That's the kind of loyalty that I think is a sign of like a healthy work environment, right? So to your point, Caitlin, a sign that we're talking about weaponized loyalty is when people leave, and suddenly these people who were such an important part of the workforce before are now like suddenly very evil or awful or just don't exist anymore. Like
Mm-hmm.
you have to question that work environment.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to put it in the context of like personal relationships, perhaps to make this even more visceral, is the same kind of red flag as when your partner does not accept any kind of criticism
Mm,
and does very clearly does not want to be held accountable. And of course, like in the context of healthy relationships, like a I I'll speak for myself. Like I not only want a partner who does this, but I want to be this person as well in personal relationships. If I do something wrong, I do want to be called out on it, or at least have an open conversation about I could have handled this better. I could have, chosen my words better. Whatever the situation is, I'm not looking to have like a peanut gallery, so to speak, in a partner. And so in the same way, like, we need to be open to accountability. And for heaven's sakes, why should this also not be applicable to leadership?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, good leaders should be creating very clear systems of accountability for themselves.
Hmm.
We also are in a time when leaders can get away with being a little lazy or not being accountable because the job market is so rough. So I do find myself having more and more conversations with people that are like, yeah, this job is not healthy for me. I am burnt out and I have to stay. And I might even have
Hmm.
to stay to the end of getting a new degree or to the end of getting a new training or certification. So often what we're talking about is, how do I survive a toxic work environment? Not how do I leave, but how do I
Hmm.
survive until I can leave?
Hmm.
Um, and so yes, it does start with a little bit of grief and recognizing that not only is this place not what I was hoping it would be, but I'm not who I was hoping I could be in this place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more with you, Lindy, that, I think it's incredibly important to make space for that grief because in that realization, it is very heavy and it can also feel very, very isolating. And I feel like in some ways it can also make us feel, I mean, for lack of a better word, make us feel dumb.
Mm,
Like, at the outside of this opportunity, I thought it was going to be X, Y, and Z, and now this is, turning out to be something that is actively taking from my wellness and, well-being. And I feel like one of the automatic responses is the assumption that I put myself in this situation, which yeah, so I think the other part of that grief process is to, give ourselves some grace and because, it's speaking personally again, I recognize that there are some things that I could have done like in that work experience to better set myself up for success or just be more aware of toxic things going on like as they made themselves known or present to me, but we also have to, treat ourselves with grace and remember that like, hey, we didn't set up this environment.
mhm.
We didn't, set up this space to be toxic.
Yes. Yeah. Again, that gaslighting can make us, the space relies on you thinking this is all your fault in order to perpetuate itself. So I think,
Yep.
it's radical to say, actually, like, this isn't my fault. This was established before I got here. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the other thing that I had to do, and I talk about this with folks in these situations all the time. In fact, I appreciate someone sharing at one point, I'm only so let me back up and say, if we are in these situations, that means that we're in a constant state of fight or flight.
Mm.
We are constantly having to think about, talk about masking and code switching. It's a next step to then start to think about what will get me in trouble, right? Like what would get me fired? What's going to put that target on my back? What's going to get that microscope to be even more focused on me? That's an exhausting process, and that's on a good day, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's just the day to day. That's not counting the meetings where maybe you are being yelled at by your boss in front of everyone, right? Or when you're having certain things demanded of you that feel impossible, right? Deadlines, whatever it might be. So, an important first step is to ask yourself truthfully, what can I give right now? So, going
Mm-hmm.
back to that 125%, oftentimes it's like all I have in me is 60%. So, the question then becomes, how can I only give my 60% and how can I fly under the radar? So, what people often find is that their 125% was actually far more than they needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, the 60% they start to find out is exactly the same amount that everyone else around them is giving. And that's why they are in the situation. I don't mean to victim blame, but oftentimes when one person's giving 125% and everyone else is giving 60%, then yeah, they're going to be working really hard and their work
Mm-hmm.
is going to be under scrutiny simply because everyone else is working really hard to make sure that they can not work very hard. I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense, but so sometimes it's okay. I need to be like everyone else who's being aggressively mediocre. And how do I
Mm-hmm.
do that? And for how long can I get away with being aggressively mediocre in a system that was built on me giving far too much?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm thinking specifically of that scene in the movie Big with Tom Hanks where he goes into his first job and if I recall correctly, it's like a data entry clerk where they're literally typing information into the computers and first day, Tom Hanks, like as a literal child, sits down and he's a fast typer, and so he's tip typing away, doing his job. All right, I got this. I guess this is what adults do. And John Lovitz peers over from the next cubicle and says, "Hey, hey, hey, what are you doing?" Like, what? I'm just doing what they told me. Just slowly, slowly. You're trying to make us all look bad?
Yeah.
Like this is a run out the clock situation. You're
Yes.
gonna be doing this every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't over deliver unless you want to over deliver every time, which is just kind of good advice in general.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so this sounds so defeatist, but that is exactly what it is. It's I
Mm-hmm.
have been defeated by this work environment. This is not where I want to be. How can I survive until I get out? And it starts with recognizing that if I'm in fight or flight constantly, I've got like 2 hours of good work in me a day, and that might only be 3 to 4 days out of the week.
Yeah.
Many jobs can kind of get away with that ratio. And it's not until you're forced to recognize that that you're like, oh, actually, that's probably what everyone else is doing. And even as a therapist, I remember distinctly going through a difficult time and sitting with my therapist and saying, what do I do? Like, I've got nothing
Mm-hmm.
to give. And she said to me, she's like, Lyndie, you can just nod and smile as a therapist. And it was revolutionary. And
Mm-hmm.
the really humbling thing was when I had those days where that's all I had to give and that's all I did. And people had huge breakthroughs because I just got out of the way of the work.
Mm. That is so incredibly powerful, Lindy. And honestly, in terms of the workplace, it reminds me of like the 80/20 rule. If you let the other person do 80% of the talking and you're only doing 20%, I mean, how much of the work have you just offloaded? I mean, and especially when we talk about how much of the mental workload that women specifically undertake all the time.
Mm-hmm. And Caitlin, that is usually the majority of the conversation I'm having, especially with women, is why are you doing that work? Why are you
Hmm.
on 50 committees? Why are you receiving calls from your boss out of work hours so that they can vent about something?
Hmm.
Why are you carrying the flag for a certain cause at work when it's not going anywhere and you're being targeted for it?
Oh, absolutely.
That's often, and that's where the grief comes in, right? It's recognizing, oh, like this is actually not only a waste of my time and energy, but it's causing active harm, not just to me, but to others who might try to take this up with me.
Yep.
So knowing when to step back and knowing to when to recognize that this is the part of my job that I shouldn't be doing anymore can be incredibly confronting.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when we get to those points where, whatever it is that's the final straw. I find it fascinating because, and I'm sure you've experienced this in sessions with clients and, in career conversations as well. The last straw is often a very small thing. It's not some huge bombastic ask made of people in these situations, but it's the straw that broke the camel's back. And to digress with a quick story, personally, my final last straw in to make the realization that I was not only in a toxic workplace, but also one that I desperately wanted to leave as quickly as possible, was when I was being micromanaged about a committee that I was literally volunteering my time for and
Mm-hmm.
had to was made to make the case that volunteering my personal time towards this cause that I cared about and was a great networking opportunity was, number one, not going to detract from my work, and number two was not going to interfere with other projects.
Mm-hmm. 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 Talk about toxic.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think in summary, Caitlin, it starts with recognizing this environment is not healthy for me.
Hmm.
And it might not even be that it's a toxic work environment. It's just not healthy for you for whatever reason, right?
Yes. Hmm.
And it's okay to recognize that and own that, and then making space for some grief. Because if you've ever cared about that job or cared about being a good employee or cared about your reputation, you're probably going to feel some kind of way about that.
Yep.
And then asking yourself, can I leave? And for many people, the answer is no, not right away. And kind of creating a plan, whether it's with a therapist or that safe person or a close friend that you can trust with confidentiality and who can kind of see things for what they are, coming up with a plan to either fly under the radar or offload some work because you might recognize that your bandwidth is far less than you once had. Ask yourself, where am I doing work that I don't have to be doing? Where can I be mediocre instead of excellent?
Hmm.
Where can I do B minus work instead of A plus work while you are creating an exit strategy?
Hmm.
And then when you're not at work, doing everything in your power to take care of yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And just a quick side note as well for those listening, if you happen to be in this situation right now and you're looking to form that exit strategy and also find your support system that can help you tolerate this situation just as long as you need to. I would also caution, I mean, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with like making sure it's a trusted person, but be very careful about any indications that you make of any plans to leave a company because
Mhm.
those decisions can be made very quickly and have lasting impacts on your work or even being there sooner than you're ready. So I would definitely caution you to keep that information close to the vest.
Absolutely. And we talked about, to your point, Caitlin, it's an excellent point. There are times when the safe people are simply not within the company, not within your workspace, right? Like your safe
Right.
people might just have to be outside of the workspace.
Hmm.
Um, so I think, yes, recognizing this is not my family. This is
Hmm.
not, these are not my therapists, right? Like I need to like find places where I can process that are outside of the space and be very, very cautious about sharing next steps or any part of your experience that can be used against you, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I would definitely agree that a lot of times those people exist outside of the workplace or have to just by dint of association. But to go back to what you were talking about previously in terms of just feeling that like release of pressure of having to say the thing out loud, sometimes that in itself can make the biggest difference of just sharing with somebody again that is safe. I need to leave.
Mm-hmm.
I need to leave this situation. And to go back to the personal relationships dynamic as well. Like I have had some of the most poignant conversations with dear friends of mine where that in itself was a huge part of helping them to deal with the situation in realizing that yeah, I can't leave this relationship right now, although I do recognize more and more every day that it is a toxic relationship that is actively causing me mental, emotional, any form of harm, but I can't in this very moment. But just saying that out loud and sharing that with somebody makes the biggest difference.
Absolutely. So, Caitlin, I appreciate your time and your thoughts on this. This one feels a little bit heavier because I do think there are a lot of people in this situation, and it's one that I feel like doesn't get talked about as much as like just quit and find another job or, just leave. Oftentimes the answer is I have to stay. And how do I
Yes.
survive this? And so, yeah, please reach out to us if you find yourself in situations like this and you're looking for some thoughts or, have thoughts that you want to share with our listeners on ways that you've survived toxic work environments that you couldn't leave yet while you were burned out. We always love tools and survival tools that we can share with folks.
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely welcome those comments, and maybe even share for a future episode maybe some quitting stories, because to quote Oscar from The Office, I love a good quitting story. It makes me feel like I have more control of my own life.
I love that. So stay tuned. We hope to be able to offer some options for sharing with each other. Well, Caitlin, when you're not in the break room, where can we find you?
You can find me at CaitlinTruhella.com, and also on TikTok and Instagram at Creative Caitlin or Creative.Caitlin. For anybody looking for support as a creative or wanting to reconnect with innovation and also ideation sessions that help support that, as well as writers looking for support in their book or manuscript projects, you can always contact me there. And Lyndie, how about you? Where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Lyndie Larimore, Facebook, Lyndie Larimore, or at lyndieLarimore.com. Um, Reach out with any questions if you need support in leaving a situation or trying to pivot in your career. I am a certified career coach, so I can help with this. But also, yeah, I'm also just kind of a survivor of toxic work environments. So feel free and reach out and share your story. You can message me or plug yourself into my schedule. And also at our burnout break room on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok. We love YouTube as well, Spotify. We love hearing from folks.
Absolutely. Yeah, so whether you want to share stories of your toxic workplaces or how you extricated yourself from those situations, we would love to hear from you and also support you in any way that we can. But until next time, thanks for joining the Burnout Break Room.
Thanks. See you next time.